As some of you guys are probably already aware, there is a very big patch coming out for Valorant here in the near future. Of course, I'm talking about patch 11.8, which is going to introduce things like nerfs to some of the agent abilities, also some different changes to the weapons themselves. And in my personal opinion, I do feel like a lot of these changes are necessary. However, there's also a few of them that I'm sort of questioning a little bit. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video today. We're going to watch a video by Kanga explaining all these changes, and then of course afterwards we're going to have a discussion about it. So real quickly, let's go ahead and watch the video.
Valorant's patch 11.8 is huge. Almost 20 agents are going to be changed in some way, and almost all of them are going to be nerfed. The patch itself, I believe, is still a day or two away, but Riot have posted numerous videos with information regarding some of these changes, so I wanted to compile all of that into this one video. So keep in mind that the actual patch notes aren't live just yet, and in some cases the numbers will be missing, but just bear with me, and this is what Riot have told us so far. The overall goal of this patch is that players will think more carefully and intentionally about when and how to use their utility when attacking and retaking.
Which I actually think is a really good change. One of the problems that I've always had with this game is the fact that it seems like the abilities have kind of taken the front seat now, and they're used so often and a lot of times just thrown out there. You know, they're not really strategically thinking about how they're using them, and that's really the way that it should be. So I am glad to see that Riot's making some changes to these abilities, and I do think it will be positive going forward. It might take players a little while to kind of get used to that, but again, I really think that that is a very important change that Valorant needs moving forward. So I'm glad to see they're making these changes.
Will overall add more counterplay when abilities come into play, and a lot of these changes sound pretty drastic, but I think it's going to be important to see how these all feel in game before jumping to conclusions.
And that's very important because, like with Vito, I kind of jumped to conclusions with him. I thought he was going to be very overpowered. And then, of course, once he was put in the game, I realized that wasn't the case. So again, anytime they're making changes like this, even though it may seem drastic, just like he said, we shouldn't be too quick to jump to conclusions till we actually get it in the game and have it in our hands and can actually try it out.
But anyway, first of all, we have some changes to certain ability types across the board. So, for example, with stuns, most of these are now being reduced down to a more normalized number of 2.5 seconds. So I believe this applies to almost everything, but the examples they gave included Breach's stun, Gecko's wingman, Neon's stun, and Deadlock's traps. All will now stun for 2.5 seconds instead of 3.5 seconds, and those longer stun durations will be saved for ultimate effects like Breach's.
One thing that I always sort of criticize a lot of developers on, it seems like whenever they make these changes, they're often very drastic at first. To me, I probably would not have reduced the stuns all the way down to 2.5. I probably would have done it like a half a second at a time, reduced it down to 3 and kind of seen how that played out. And then if it needed it more, bring it down to 2.5. I'm not really sure how this is going to affect these abilities. Again, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But, you know, Call of Duty does this as well. When they make these changes and these nerfs, they're often very, very drastic. And sometimes to me, the better way of dealing with this is to do it a little bit at a time rather than trying to take this massive chunk all at once. That's just my personal thoughts on that. But
another global change is to near sights, where the range you can see is being upped from 5 meters to 7 meters. So this is
I mean, that's not really going to affect Omen that much if he throws out the paranoia and you can see just a little bit further. Most of the time when I get hit by him, the Omen is far away. He's usually at a distance. So I still think that it's still going to be a viable ability regardless. It's really not going to make that much difference if you can see a little bit further inside of it or not. So I don't think that'll be a major change.
Nerf to abilities like Omen's Paranoia, Reyna's Leer, and Fade's Prowler. There are even changes to combat stims. This should be a nerf overall, but they wanted to bring things like Brimstone's stim beacon as well as Reyna and KO's ultimates in line with each other. They said that reloading, firing, and drawing will all feel slower, but hopefully we get some exact values whenever the actual patch notes release. Finally, for those more broad changes, big AoE type ultimates will no longer be as wide. So some noteworthy ones there include Breach, Fade, ISO, and Waylay, all essentially having the width of their ultimate reduced.
I actually think that's a good change. That makes using them have to be a little bit more strategic. You almost have to have a sound cue or peak or something like that to know exactly where a character is before you use those abilities. Right now, because they have such a wide range, you can almost blindly throw them out and catch people with them. So I actually think that that's a very good change. I really am glad to see that come to the game because the width of a lot of those abilities, in my opinion, was far too wide.
Now though, for some more specific agent changes, looking at the initiators, abilities that would typically have a 40-second cooldown are being increased to 60 seconds. That's going to be Fade's Eye, Sober's Recon Dart, KO's Flash, and Breach's Stun.
So I don't think that that's entirely correct. He mentioned KO's flashes, but KO's flashes don't regen. The thing that regens is his knife. So I'm pretty sure that what he meant to say there was KO's knife. Anything that regens will now go from 40 seconds to 60 seconds, which in my opinion is good for a lot of those abilities, especially if they're any kind of abilities that cause any kind of damage. Now with KO's knife, I'm not 100% sure about this, and I'm not just saying this because I play with KO a lot, but if their goal is to help reduce abilities, that's what KO's knife does. You know, you want that knife to be able to be used a little bit more often because it keeps the other team from being able to use their abilities for a moment. And in my opinion, if your goal is actually to reduce the abilities, then it feels like his knife would be one of those things that should regen a little bit faster. We'll just kind of have to wait and see how all this plays out.
Speaking of Breach, his stun will now pop slightly faster, from 1.2 seconds down to 1.1 seconds, and his ultimate will now cost 8 points again instead of 9. Although don't forget as well, like I said earlier, Breach's ultimate is going to be slightly less wide. Breach's flash now lasts a tiny bit longer, from 2 seconds up to 2.25 seconds, and KO's flash is
So they reduced the size of Brimstone's ultimate, which is okay. You know, I don't see any problem with that. You're going to have to be a lot more accurate, and it does give players a little bit more time to get out of it. It's still basically going to be used for the same thing, and that's to hold people off of like defusing bombs and stuff. It's still going to have that same effect, but it'll just give players the ability to get out of it. So there's not as many kills with it, which I don't personally mind. I'm actually a Brimstone player and I don't mind those changes. You're definitely going to have to be a lot more strategic with how you use it and where you place it at. So I think overall that's a pretty good change.
got the same buff to his right click, which originally blinded for only 1.5 seconds, but that'll now also blind for 2.25 seconds.
Now, KO's right click is very dangerous. And as a KO person, I mean, he's my main character. I can tell you that right flashing people, right click flashing is very dangerous. It's very hard for people to turn away from. It's very hard for them to avoid. Now, a lot of times when I pop out, I usually don't have any problems getting 1 or 2 kills with it. I think the duration of it was actually pretty good. But to me, I don't fully understand moving it from 1.5 to 2.5. I think that's going to probably be a little bit overpowered, and that's coming from a KO main.
Fade's Eye got another slight nerf. It'll now stay in the world for a shorter duration, from 2 seconds down to 1.5 seconds. Gecko has a number of nerfs. The cooldown on Dizzy and Wingman is now going to be 20 seconds after pickup. That is an increase from 10 seconds.
That was huge. I mean, when you have the ability to be able to re-pick your abilities up and use them over and over and over again, I think that this was definitely needed. And I know a lot of Gecko mains will be really pissed off about this. It's been highly abused, and I think that's why people will be so mad about it, because they won't be able to abuse it anymore. But this was absolutely a great change. I've said the Gecko's ability cooldown needed to be changed for a very, very long time.
And then the health on Thrash and Wingman is also going to be slightly reduced. Thrash is going from 200 to 180, and Wingman is going from 80 down to 60.
That's
that one in
good.
particular, it feels like more of a consistency change rather than an actual nerf. Just in the sense that for Thrash, for example, originally it would take 5 Vandal bullets versus 6 Phantom bullets to break. Now it'll cost 5 bullets for each. Next though, let's take a look at extensional changes. Firstly, some of their ability cooldowns have also been increased to 60 seconds to match the initiator changes. So notably on Cypher's Spy Cam, Killjoy's Turret, and Vice's Flash, when those abilities get destroyed. Speaking of Vice, she is actually getting some major additional nerfs on top of the across the board changes. Her Razorvine now has slightly less HP, from 40 down to 20, then her ultimate will cover 20% less area, and take almost 30%
Oh,
longer to
yes.
activate.
I've always felt that the area that that thing covers is just way too big. I mean, if you're out in the middle of that, you can't avoid it. So I'm really glad that they've reduced this. I just thought that that ability can cover way, way too much space. I've always thought it was way too big. So that's a very necessary change, I think.
On top of all that, Vice's flash will no longer play a sound when successfully blinding an enemy. Moving on to Cypher, his trips are getting nerfed. They will
That
no
makes
longer
sense.
concuss you, instead only slowing you. They are going to make the wind-up time a little bit faster. However, now you will only get revealed after the wind-up has fully popped, instead of getting revealed during the wind-up animation. Next, we have a change to Killjoy. Her alarm bot has slightly less health, from 50 down to 20, and then an adjustment to her turret. It will now take longer to rearm after Killjoy enters its range again. However, enemies will get slowed down a lot more when tagged by her turret.
I'm not completely on board with those changes. Now, I don't really play as Killjoy, but I didn't think the alarm bot was that big of a problem that it needed to be nerfed. The turret, in my opinion, I mean, I thought the turret was fine too. You know, you learn how to play against it over time. I honestly didn't think any of her abilities were really that big of a problem.
Finally, for the Sentinels, the wall champs, so Sage and Deadlock, it's going to be slightly easier to break their walls. The small nodes on Deadlock's wall go from 570 HP down to 400.
That was much needed. I've always thought that breaking Deadlock's wall was much harder than Sage's wall. A lot of times because there's 5 points. I mean, you want to concentrate on the middle one, obviously, because it completely destroys it. But a lot of times I go through 2 full clips just to destroy that wall. And when you start talking about the importance of needing your bullets inside of a game, I mean, yes, a lot of times when he would throw that wall up, you would just move, you would just relocate, you would do something else. But to me, sometimes that's just not an option. I think this was much needed. I've always thought the Deadlock's wall was just a little bit too overpowered.
HP, and Sage's wall pieces will go from 800 HP down to 600 HP. Both walls are now slightly cheaper too to make up for this, originally costing 400 credits and now going down to 300 credits.
Again, I didn't think Sage's wall was really that bad. I didn't think it was nearly as bad as Deadlock's wall.
Moving onto the controllers now, and starting with Astra, the fragile debuff from her pool has a shorter duration, going from 5 seconds down to 2.5 seconds. Then the cooldown on her stun and pull is also increasing to 60 seconds, and the cooldown on her smoke will also be increasing, I believe, to only 40 seconds. That same cooldown increase applies to Omen Smoke 2, going from 30 seconds up to 40 seconds. Omen gets some.
The cooldowns for the smokes, I think, are necessary. I think they're used entirely too much, especially if you have one team that's got like 2 or 3 smoke characters on it. But one thing I've never understood about the way that they do things, to me, it seems like all of those characters, the smoke should all last the exact same amount of time. So whether it's 12 seconds, whether it's 15 seconds, you know, Omen and Brimstone smoke should be the exact same length. Now, of course, you would exclude characters like Clove and Jet, some of these characters that have these other movement abilities and things like that. Obviously, their smoke should be a lot shorter, but the difference between Omen and Brimstone, I've never really understood why Brimstone smokes are just so long. I think that those really need to be reduced.
Additional nerfs to his paranoia, so alongside the near sight change, paranoia will now no longer travel quite as far, but it will cover that area faster. Originally traveling at 1.6 meters per second, now it'll go at 2 meters per second. And for Viper, her initial decay
Those are
is
good
now weaker.
changes.
I think when you first walked into any of her smokes, it'll whack you for 30 HP, now it'll only be 10 HP. Last but not least,
I don't know about that change. To me, that one's still kind of weird. Like, I thought that that was fairly balanced. I think that this is just sort of overkill where they basically had to do something to that character. But I mean, getting a decay of, you know, 20, 30 is not really, in my opinion, overpowering or anything like that. I mean, a lot of times you'll go through it, but you may not even have that Viper there on that site when you walk through it. And then once the decay goes away, it's like, what was the point, you know? So I don't know. I just don't feel like that was really a necessary change. But again, I mean, I'm sure they have their reasons for doing it.
so moving on to the duelists, where Yoru is hit the most heavily. They are lowering the health on his gate crash, so it'll now get one-tapped by a phantom, and even adding a sound cue to his original location, whether he teleported or faked it. There's a big nerf to his ultimate too, where you can no longer use clone or flash while inside of dimensional drift.
That
Speaking of
is
his
huge. That is absolutely huge. You know, when you're using his alt and you can't see him, and then all of a sudden he knows exactly where to place his blind, then he can jump out. Like, to me, that's always been like super overpowered. I'm really glad that they made that change because I think it was absolutely necessary.
flash, the maximum duration is being reduced from 1.75 seconds down to 1.5 seconds, and his clone will also blind for a short.
Now, that one I don't necessarily agree with. I don't agree with reducing his flash. If he can't use it inside of that ultimate, I still think that his flashes should probably last just as long as other people's flashes. To me, all the flashes should last the exact same across the board, regardless of which character it is. That's just my personal opinion, but
Shorter duration. Next for Neon, alongside the change to her stun I mentioned earlier, it will now take longer for her fuel to fully drain, from 12 seconds up to 16 seconds. However, now it's going to take way longer for her fuel to fully regain, going from 20 seconds up to 60 seconds.
I actually would have left the fuel exactly where it was, but made this change right here because neons drive me crazy. I'm trying to sneak onto a site. I'm trying to be real quiet. I know there's players on site. And then lo and behold, here comes a neon flying from behind me, just like alerting everybody that we're there. Like, the neon running around has always sort of bugged me a little bit about this game because they'll use it so often and no other character can move that fast that much. I actually think that the neon changes are good from the fuel recharge. This was absolutely needed, but I think they probably should have left the amount of fuel also the same length too, because, you know, she doesn't need it for 16 seconds. I would have probably reduced it to 10 if it were me personally, but that's just me.
Then lastly, there are some nerfs to Waylay. Her hindered debuff from Saturate is going to be shortened from 4 seconds down to 3 seconds. Then a number of changes.
That puts it more in line with the other flashes and stuff, which I think is good. And again, I think the stuns and the flashes should all be 3 seconds. Like, I don't understand why we're doing this 0.25 and 0.5 and just make them the same all the way across the board. Like, I feel like that would be the easiest way to sort of fix them, but
Her ultimate duration is going from 7 seconds down to 6 seconds. There is a decrease to her movement speed buff in the ultimate, but convergence will now have a faster wind-up time. Beyond all those agent changes, I believe there are also some slight adjustments to the Vandal and Phantom. The recoil will now take 2 bullets longer to kick in, and I think it'll be somewhat easier to control while also having a chance of being more random when the actual left-to-right swing starts. Then the SMGs are being changed too. The Spectre should feel easier to control.
Yes, that one's definitely needed it. Whoa.
Faster.
Oh, no, 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 no. The Stinger is already such a bad weapon in this game. Like, when you mix its high rate of fire with the fact that it has such a short distance on it, increasing the recoil on it it's just going to be absolutely broken. I don't understand why they did that. And the Stinger to me needs to be a little bit more of a viable weapon, especially in eco rounds where you're stuck having to use it. I mean, obviously, the only point of a Stinger is really just to see if you can get one kill on somebody and then steal their gun. But there are times where I don't get a chance to get to a weapon. I get stuck with that Stinger, and it's already hard enough to kill people as it is with that. And then you're going to increase the recoil on it. It's going to be completely unusable.
In case you missed it, there are also going to be Abyss and Pearl changes too, so hopefully you caught all of that. Again, unfortunately for now, some of these changes we don't have the specific numbers for, and instead
we'll kind of have to wait for it to come out.
But of course, when the actual update goes live, I'll do the usual side-by-side comparison. Just for now, this is all that Valorant has given us to work with.
And we'll go back and watch the other video when it comes out.
Starting in a little under a day from now, so keep an eye out and let me know what you think of these changes on paper.
So overall, there's some pretty good changes in there. I mean, a lot of them were ones that I feel like needed to happen for a very long time. But again, as we were going through it, I mentioned some of the things that I kind of disagree with, you know, all of this. Oh, well, let's make this flash last this long, but let's reduce this stun. Or, you know, to me, all the flashes and stuns should probably just be the same across the board. Make them all 2.5 or 3 seconds. That seems like the easiest way to balance them out. Things like every single time I have a neon on my team, I just hear them running around all over the place. And the fact that they can move that quickly and for that long, to me, kind of bothers me a little bit. I just don't think that anybody should have movement nearly that long like neon does. Things like obviously the cooldown for weapons that regenerate over time For a lot of the agents, I think that's absolutely necessary, especially if those abilities that regen cause damage. Like, I think it's absolutely necessary, or if they're flashes. I know with KO, I have to buy my flashes at the beginning of each round. And once those flashes are gone, I can't use them anymore. That's really the way flashes should be inside of this game. They should be purchased at the beginning of the round. And once you've used them, they're gone. But overall, I do think a lot of these changes are necessary. I do think they're going to help to kind of bring the game back to the gunplay a little bit. Again, we'll just kind of have to wait and see how all this stuff is implemented. But I do think a lot of these changes were necessary, and it'll be very interesting to see exactly how this plays out moving forward and how this is going to affect the overall gameplay of Valorant.